All right. Welcome to the Marmalade Partner Webinar Series. I'm Steph Charkle, the Head of Americas for Marmalade, and I'll be your host for this series. The Marmalade Partner Webinar Series is designed to share thought leadership, trends, and tips around the services and integrations that work with the Marmalade cross-platform game development SDK, and features partners like Flurry, Fortumo, HasOffers, Payment Wall, Exit Games, Gamehouse, and others. We're going to start off with about 45 minutes of presentation, followed by 15 minutes of Q&A. Feel free to post your questions during the presentation in the lower left part of your screen. We will address these questions just following the presentation, so feel free to post them anytime during the presentation, and we will get to those as soon as we are finished with the presentation. Today's guest speaker is Raymond Bautista, Director of Platform Partnerships at HasOffers and MobileAppTracking. And he's going to share tips with you on mobile app tracking and attribution. Raymond?
Wonderful. Thank you, Steph. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to everybody joining us today on this webinar. It's great that you're part of us and getting a chance to learn about the realities of mobile app tracking and attribution. The trends. So as consumers are embracing new screens, new content, and transforming how they shop, communicate, play games, and consuming content at a very accelerated way via apps, marketers are actually recognizing the tremendous power of small screens and that mobile is identified as an integral element of the marketing mix. You've probably seen these numbers before or not, but according to Gartner, global mobile advertising spending is forecast to reach about $18 billion this year. It's up estimated from 13.1 from last year. And then moving forward as we go across to 2015 and 2017, growth will be really fueled by improved market conditions such as targeting technologies and measurement standardization. On this particular slide, as smartphones get smarter and carriers get faster to 4G or LTE, smartphone penetration has increased, and so is the propensity for users to respond to advertising increase as well. IDC said global smartphone shipments actually topped 1 billion units for first time in 2013, and now the consumption of content in apps have really increased over 200%. A partner of ours, Flurry, found that 80% of smartphone usage is actually through in-app. And I personally use all my apps, for example, like Instagram, Yelp, BBC News, and even games such as Plants and Zombies by Electronic Arts. Today, there's about over 2 million apps in the app stores. And getting your app found and downloaded depends on really the efficient and productive mobile marketing out there. If an app is not discovered organically, quite frankly, being discovered and acquiring new users is pretty increasingly difficult, which means one of the best ways to reach the world, to reach and scale, is really through mobile advertising, via mobile web and in-app with ad units such as display, rich media, and video. And most of you probably already know that most of the early adopters were gaming, and gaming continues to be heavy spenders in the mobile advertising space. However, m-commerce, travel, retail, TV networks, and brands alike have actually started dipping their toes in and diving into the mobile advertising space. With mobile advertisers really showing and focusing on the direct response and branding and how they're keeping an eye on ROI and LTV, comes to play where mobile advertising channels that you're seeing here, they include like direct publishers, right? Like Facebook and Twitter, and ad networks, very similar to Chartboost and Mobi, DSPs and RTBs like MoPub. But let me just show you this particular slide. I just wanted to briefly show the mobile ecosystem from a high view, if you haven't seen it already. If you just take a look at the middle left section where mobile analytics is located, you'll see that that's where mobile app tracking and other mobile analytics are how we fit within the ecosystem. Working with the right advertising partners can actually be easy and controllable. But there actually seems to be one problem still existing. And that one problem is mobile app tracking and attribution measurement. This slide is, I wanted to keep it very casual and fun. You might find yourself confused and frustrated if you don't understand mobile app tracking attribution. Even if you're one of the best developers out there or one of the best marketers out there, just like LeBron James is one of the best basketball players out there right now, frustration can actually include not knowing who is responsible for the install event, and then subsequently which publisher should actually receive payment for generating that install, duplicate attribution, and marketers overpaying for new users. I really believe that here at MobileAppTracking, measuring and optimizing mobile ad performance is a challenge for many marketers, and getting it right really depends on using the right tracking technologies. And this decision about how to track your advertising really results in intimately tied to where you're going to advertise and what information you want to be able to report on. Oh, and by the way, let's not forget about SDKs, because the sheer resources required to implementing more than one SDK and maintaining it and keeping an app performance up becomes relatively impossible. Tracking. As there is yet no industry standard per se in tracking, most mobile marketers face a monumental problem here: tracking the effectiveness of their marketing campaigns across the entire mobile space, which is very enormous, that has blurred lines. To make matters actually more difficult, the two main devices that are currently used, iOS and Android, vary slightly in methods used and the order in which those methods are executed. So let's just dive into the real question here that probably everybody's asking is, what is app tracking and attribution? Why is it important? When it comes to mobile advertising, there's always a question regarding attribution, I believe. And attribution is actually defined as the measurement of user events and the results of marketing activity. That event can actually be included as an app install, a repeat app launch, a level completion in gaming, or an app purchase. Every mobile marketer wants to measure the effectiveness of their marketing campaign, especially when it involves spending a whole bunch of money on their advertising. However, I would have to say that attribution is pretty unique for mobile, because there's actually no standard at the moment for tracking methodology. Now, app tracking and attribution measurement allows and this gives a chance for the client to have a deep understanding of the long tail value, the LTV. I want to move over to cookies, because it seems like everybody's thinking that you can track app installs with cookies, and it's similar to online, but that's really not the case. They don't work with mobile apps. The prevalence of apps and the market share of the iPhone and its cookie-free Safari browser makes cookies pretty irrelevant in mobile. And rendering those efforts to track across different devices, networks, and media makes it very immensely difficult. Now, here's a nice flow of what's actually recommended. Is we need to use other identifiers besides that cookies. If you're in advertising on iOS, for example, on a mobile app on a premium network, and several publishing partners drive app installs, you can't just append a tracking parameter to a URL to track and attribute the app performance across several sources. The URL you would need to track conversions is actually in the App Store itself with the URL, and you can't just append a tracking parameter to the URL to attribute installs to its sources. I'm seeing that a lot of people are getting a slight echo, and I apologize about that. Let me see if I turn down my headphone is completely down, and hopefully, let's see if that's better. Audience, is that much better? Perfect. Again, I apologize for that echo, and I'm glad everything is good now. Great. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Javier. Thank you, Stanton, for letting me know that we are good to go and continue. So again, just wanted to quickly identify that here's the identifiers, how it starts the process from beginning to end. We have, of course, your tracking link URL with different device identifiers, whether it might be from Apple IFA, Android ID, and the default will always be device fingerprinting. With the tracking URL, I'll take you directly to the App Store, whether it may be for iTunes or Google Play, and an install happens when the user comes to time for the first time opens that app. I did want to mention that once a user clicks into an App Store environment, their actions enter a black hole, and we can no longer determine who's responsible for generating install on a free app or a purchase on a paid app. This tracking is becoming an immense problem, specifically for iOS, and Google's the same way, where Google provides a referral tracking system to let marketers see which marketing sources are working and driving visitors to the Android market, and then downloading the app. Although there isn't a standard method of tracking iOS, but we use two different methodologies that are most useful, and that's that unique identifier matching, which I initially spoke about. And attribution using unique identifiers is done by matching the unique identifier from the install to a click. And then unique identifiers matching is an automated and real-time way to comparing clicks to installs instead of manually conducting the matching at the end of the week that I would say marketers in the past were using with their spreadsheets. And that just becomes very cumbersome. The unique identifier really enables a one-to-one matching of a click to install, where identifiers can be passed app to app. And I also mentioned device fingerprinting. It pulls basic, it's not 100% unique information from a user's device headers. It includes the IP address to connect a user from a click-to-app install. Device fingerprinting really works by redirecting a user through a tracking link and collects the publicly available HTTP header with that device, of course. This information is then used to create a fingerprint about the click with the tracking link. When a user installs the mobile app for the first time and the SDK collects the same, maybe the same data points from within that mobile app and sends it to a platform, that platform actually generates the fingerprint of that install and then searches for the clicks with the matching fingerprint. And then eventually that last click with the matching fingerprint is then used to be attributed in the install. I'm going to move forward to my next slide on advertising flow with SDK, since I just brought up that fact about SDKs. For this slide, you'll see that when advertisers work with only one publisher, and I want to say publisher, it could be Pandora, Spotify, or an advertising partner like Chartboost or Millennial or InMobi, or even a DSP. The problem of attributing an event for your mobile app to the rightful promotion source is not really a problem. If only one publisher or partner is able to promote your mobile app, then obviously only they can be responsible for that install. But when your mobile app is installed, the SDK that the publisher is using is implemented within that app, it notifies them of that install. And with that install attribution, everybody's happy because it's correct and they're good to go. But let's look at when you're using multiple SDKs. Although in the single SDK, everyone's happy. However, now when advertisers are working with multiple partners, say if I'm an advertiser and I'm working with a direct publisher with different games, and I'm working with an ad network, and I'm also running with a DSP, and working with all these multiple partners, there's so many out there, but it's not so cut and dry. Which one of those partners is in fact responsible for an install event of your mobile app? In this environment, the issue of, let's say, duplicate attribution for installs can arise, and since multiple publishers and partners are promoting your mobile app, there's going to be multiple SDKs as well, where you're being notified of the respective install for a particular publisher or partner. And therefore, each one of those publishers and partners will actually assume responsibility for being that source of the promo or that install. Now that, given that advertisers now use a multiple amount of partners concurrently, the question is, how do they actually know who is truly responsible for that install event? And subsequently, which publisher should I receive payment for generating that install? Now, preventing duplicate attribution in marketers is very difficult because you end up overpaying. But let's also keep in mind that the sheer resources are required for implementing more than one SDK and maintaining it and still keeping an app performance up is very, very challenging and impossible to move forward with. Here on the next slide, we're just talking about mobile app attribution analytics. It really relies mainly on one thing. It's the accurate tracking and attribution of app installs. And other than that would be the post-install events as well. And this begs the question, what is the standard for tracking installs in our industry? Here at MobileAppTracking, we define an install as the first app opened by user that when our platform is seen, and we tie the install with the last click attribution. Moving on to the next slide, this gives you a chance to really view what that last click attribution is, and when we take that into account to the whole clickstream data and correlate that last click of the ad that generated the install with that publisher or that advertising partner who promoted that ad. But let me make a quick note on this particular slide. When an advertiser is actually working with several partners, the install rate, which is, you could get that conversion with clicks divided by installs, diminishes once you have an attribution platform like MobileAppTracking to implement it. Since we don't give credit to the publisher for installing, they're actually not responsible for it. But since the install rate can drop, publishers assume that there are tracking issues when in actuality it's related to MobileAppTracking platform not allowing them to take credit for installs where they weren't the last click to it. So again, we correlate the install with the last click. Now let me look over here. Let's look at the top mobile marketing methodologies and the pros and cons that is also outlined. Because essentially when the platform receives a request to track it and install, it uses the following methodologies of attributing installs. So first one we have is IFA and IFV. This is really the advertising identifier, is a non-permanent, non-personal device identifier for apps that can be used for tracking. This identifier for vendor is an identifier really used to associate the apps that come from the same vendor on the same device. A different IFV value is actually returned from apps on the same device that originally is different from vendors to vendors and from apps, regardless who the vendor is. And I just listed a few of the pros and cons. And I think the major pro here when you're using IFA and IFV is, unlike UDIDs that were deprecated, IFA is located in a device setting rather than its hardware. And IFA can really track you all the way to the purchase or the app download, giving advertisers like yourself more data to refine their ads and targeting. If users just take the time to limit tracking, the information will actually still be sent to the advertisers as a flagged notice, and an advertiser should respect those users' wishes moving forward. The only con, the downside is for an IFA-IV is that there's currently no big concern. That's why a number of marketers want to make sure that they get that data. However, there is a solution for IS only. If an advertiser wants to only market across multiple platforms, they have to actually implement different tracking systems rather than a universal method. And after IFA, I want to talk about the Android referrer, another common identifier. With the referrer, it's another standard method of tracking app downloads that's used by Google. And the referrer provides a method that allows advertisers to pass tracking parameters to the Google Play Store, which it then turn passes these parameters back to a source at the time of the app is downloaded. And the Android referrer actually provides a very reliable closed loop attribution, which again is highly recommended, want to be utilized by a number of mobile advertisers. The pro-to-them is that this method is very standard for all Android devices, if I know most of you already know that. But the Android referrer also provides that closed loop, which I already mentioned. That's a very big pro. And the con for it is that on Google Play, so if the app runs on other platforms, you have to implement a different type of tracking than in others. And I'm going to move forward with a different type of tracking that is used because if it's not a Google refer. And most of you know the answer to it already. It's device identifier. It outlines the platform-specific approaches of generating reusable devices. This tracking is very anonymous in that it is unique to the device without revealing data about the originating device make, the model, and other thing that has to do with the OEM. And then the second part of the identifier we want to focus on is the device fingerprinting. Here at MobileAppTracking, actually, if we are actually using IFA or a Google refer for apps, and for some reason it's not working, the default is going to be the device fingerprinting. And also, device fingerprinting is used by default in most cases when an ad is actually being ran via mobile web and not in app. Very interesting to make sure you know that. Well, for device fingerprinting technology, we really match a combination of attributes to a device to arrive at a high statistic probability that the two events with similar fingerprints are from the same device. It's essentially, hence, your device fingerprinting. For example, if someone from a specific device taps in an ad, and then a similar device profile registers and app installs about, I want to say, 60 seconds later, the probability of those two events with the same device is extremely high. And that's how we match. The pros of it, the whole process happens to be about quite frankly, 300 to 400 milliseconds. And it's very transparent to the user. Apple actually probably won't even reject it since the tracking process is out of their control. The con, however, the most important part you got to remember is that the approach of device fingerprinting carries a risk of generating many duplicates. And over a long period of time, fingerprinting can actually produce a high discrepancy rate. However, you can see a high percentage of accuracy, and we're looking at mobile tracking to be about 94%. But if you only use fingerprinting for a short period of time, that's when you get actually a good percentage of accuracy there. Now, choosing the right fit for you. When you choose the best fit, but you can choose one. Let's say if you want to move forward with IFA or device fingerprinting or with a Google refer. Although you could pick one, you can still use multiple methodologies at one time. And it's very similar to just like how Marmalade, who's actually hosting this event, just like Marmalade is an easy way to take your apps across different platforms. With tracking, there's different methodologies of attribution where there's platform-specific or cross-platforms, such as using device fingerprinting in addition to IFA and the referrer. Analytics, of course, at the end of the day, when the flow is completed from beginning and end, from the user clicking to an ad taking you to the Apple Store or Google Play, and then getting the information back and tying it in. Analytics is obviously very important to really understanding that tracking and attribution. And one thing that you definitely got to consider or have in addition to clicks and your installs and knowing your CPIs, RFIs, and conversions rate is that you need to really be able to collect different types of reporting, such as an actual reporting that gives you quick insights into the performance of your apps and the partners that you're working with. This report of an actual report is usually for reconciliation. You can use it for testing, debugging, and ensuring that all tracking and attribution continues to operate smoothly. And then there's a cohort reporting that a number of analytical companies use, and that shows a derived insight. Instead of the installs and events being tracked on an actual basis, just like an actual report, the cohort report actually aggregates your data back by clicks via date time or install date time, allowing you to really analyze your data across time in relation to actuals and cohorts. And in the end, you should also expect to get a log report. And these kind of reports are really used very similar to actuals, but instead of being aggregated in actuals, the request type you're getting by these logs are for each individual request, or for each click that comes through, each install that comes through, and each conversion rate that amounts to it, you see a log. And that's very important, in my opinion, to be able to see each data instead of an aggregated. So these log reports can also include, like I mentioned, clicks, installs, updates, events, items, and of course your server postbacks. And they're also available real time, so you can use them for testing, debugging, and ensuring all tracking continues very smoothly. We just wanted to also share how you can actually prevent some inaccurate metrics looping in. Here at MobileAppTracking, a number of partners that we work with, we're always looking at the best interests of clients, and we're more than happy to always share the best ways to move forward when it comes to installs, tracking, attribution, and of course when it comes to metrics. We really believe transparency is key here. And when we say transparency, we want to make sure, or hopefully you'll consider, an unbiased attribution, so that all the data sticks to the advertiser who is running that campaign, and no first-party data or third-party data is actually being kept by other partners or other teams. It's actually only going to be shared with them if a client wants to actually share it with them manually. But here at MobileAppTracking, we always want to make sure we believe that it's highly recommended to keep and use your own data for any kind of privacy policy. So what's next in app attribution? I know we have about a few more minutes till we go to a Q&A, but I just wanted to just quickly talk about what's really next in app attribution, because probably most of you are already aware of app tracking and attribution, and you probably learned a lot from this session. But what's next about it is, it wasn't until about last 2 years that advertisers started deploying campaigns with several advertising partners. With this demand-side push to find great, unique users and acquire along the increasing fragmentation that's around the mobile ecosystem and the complexities around it, we here at MobileAppTracking has actually launched this month multi-touch attribution, which is going to be paramount for our industry and how we move forward in this vertical and continued success. We will continue here at MobileAppTracking to really drive transparency between the advertiser and the advertising partners by extending multi-touch attribution to post-install events for re-engagement campaigns as well. So two key things that's next in attribution is our multi-touch attribution, where you're getting a chance to understand who are your install assists through different conversion windows. And the second thing is re-engagement campaigns, where you're using invoke URLs to do deep linking. And again, the most important trend moving forward for us and a number of folks who haven't heard about it yet is going to be that, again, multi-touch attribution and re-engagement. Since there's a lot of large traffic sources out there that have been very successful actually driving mobile app installs for their advertisers, they will become more focused, we believe, on re-engagement as they continue to drive value for all their advertisers. I want to just take this opportunity to take a shameless plug about mobile app tracking. So right now, it's difficult to determine which technologies to implement when you're using tracking, but because of many of the options have trade-offs and support for each technologies that can greatly vary by an ad network to a platform, tracking is one aspect to consider when researching a mobile app vendor. And without implementing a solution like ours here at MobileAppTracking, all of your advertising partners would actually take responsibility for an install, regardless of if another one of your advertising partners actually had the last click. This is because they have no way of knowing about the campaigns from your other advertising partners. Now, at the end of the day, you want to really pay the appropriate amount per install to the appropriate partner, because you can't afford to pay your entire CPI multiple times for only knowing one unique new user without without using our platform, similar to ours here at MobileAppTracking. So when we first launched our platform, again, the world of mobile advertising was still very small, and where the early adopters were gaming, obviously, and such of our clients who worked with us was just a handful of advertising partners. Some worked with 1 or 2 advertising partners, while others maybe have worked with 15 or 20. But now, if you look into our platform, we have access to over 350 integrated partners that are either ad networks, DSPs, RTBs, and even direct publishers. Alongside with this growth, over the last 2 years, the number and the diversity of these partners have increased as well and skyrocketed, and it made the industry just more complex. So it's very imperative that we continue to really drive our industry forward with both innovation and transparency. And with the innovation comes mobile app tracking and attribution, and then transparency is making sure that you understand where all your users are coming from. And again, just wanted to end the note by just sharing a little bit of information about mobile app tracking. We were created by HasOffers, and we have a one central unbiased platform for mobile app marketers just like yourself to really attribute app installs and to know about in-app engagement and to understand the purchase back to a marketing source. And that marketing source is those partners that you're probably already working with, those ad networks and direct publishers. And here, by implementing mobile app tracking, you, the developer, and also the marketer, never have to install another SDK to attribute a conversion to a new advertising partner. Because with one SDK, you're already tied to a number of partners that I've been talking about the whole day today. If it's from Google to Facebook, Twitter, different networks like Mobi, Millennial. So again, this is just a quick information about our company at MobileAppTracking, and hopefully you found this particular webinar very intuitive and informative to help you moving forward in all your decision making. Just want to say thank you everyone for your time. Much appreciated. Please feel free to reach out to me or at sales@mobileapptracking.com.